In this course, I'm going to teach you how to write C++ applications using Visual Studio exclusively. Visual Studio is what's called an integrated development environment. It has an editor where you can type your code, a compiler that transforms the code you typed into something that can be executed, and a debugger that helps you observe it executing and learn where you may have a problem and fix that problem, and a whole pile of other related tools as well. Now, there are other ways to compile your applications. You can get standalone compilers. Microsoft has a number of free ones that it distributes as part of its SDK, and other people make and either give away or sell C++ compilers. But Visual Studio is more than just a compiler, and you won't be typing a lot of commands at the command line and learning some strange syntax in order to pull your projects and applications together if you use Visual Studio. Specifically, I'm going to use Visual Studio Express, which is one of many different editions of Visual Studio. Now, Express is not a single thing. There's Visual C++ Express, Visual C# Express, and so on. There's a version for Visual Basic, for web development, for phone development. And Express is completely and totally free. It's free even if you use it to make applications that you sell for money. It's all fine. There is a little functionality in some of the other editions of Visual Studio that is not in Express. I won't be showing any of that functionality in this material. So to follow along in these demos, you can just get Express and use it. And should the time come when you find, oh, I do need something that's in Professional, which costs roughly around $1,000, a little bit less maybe, and then maybe you discover, oh, there's something that I need that's in Premium, which costs about 5 times as much as Professional. Or, wow, I love this feature in Ultimate, and I'm willing to pay double what Premium costs to get Ultimate. That's fine. That's your choice. But in order to follow along in this material, you do not need to go out and get one of those versions of Visual Studio. Now, if you happen to own a version of Visual Studio, perhaps because you work in another language and you're considering adding C++ to your arsenal, you can of course follow along in all of the demos I'm going to show you using your copy of Visual Studio. Things may look a little different because Express is a simpler, stripped down UI with less menus and less options. So my screens may look a little simpler than your screens, but all the code that works in Express will work in other editions of Visual Studio. So that's not going to be a problem at all. To get your own copy of Visual C++ Express, you can follow this URL, www.microsoft.com/express/vc for Visual C++. And that will redirect you, depending on your location, to a more complicated URL, which you can ignore. And you can see here the giant Install Now button for English, or if you wish to install for a different language, you can choose it and click Install Now. And there's a web-based installer that runs relatively quickly, downloads about 70 megs, starts to run, and then installs Express on your machine. And Visual C++ Express will coexist with Visual Studio 2010 if you have it installed as I do. But if you have Visual Studio 2010 installed, go right ahead and use that. You don't need to download Express just to follow along with what we're doing.